Here's again to the fullback. Touchdown, Washington.
That was the rivalry because they were the great team. They were the champions.
Our fans don't like Washington.
And they give it to Whittle, and he's going to get to the end zone.
I hear the term hatred used a lot in the context of this rivalry.
Coming down to this 4th and 10. Could be the ball game. 4th down and 10.
It was the most amazing play, in the moment in football.
That probably is the single greatest play in the history of Oregon football.
Hewer, you're going to go back to throw the ball. Sets up, looks, throws toward the corner.
Sometimes all it takes is one play.
First down to the 10, to the 5. He's gone! Beavers win the Civil War!
One play to change a game.
It is bedlam at Parker Stadium!
To change a season.
Down to the 30, or down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field! He's going to go in the end zone!
Or in some cases, to change the course of an entire program.
Welcome back to Autzen Stadium here in Eugene, Oregon. A sellout crowd of better than 40,000 here to see Washington in Oregon on a beautiful afternoon.
On a crisp fall afternoon in Eugene, Oregon, football fans witnessed such a play when the Washington Huskies and Oregon Ducks collided in a game that would go down as one of the greatest in Pac-12 history. The Washington Huskies were one of the nation's elite teams during the early 90s. From 1990 to 1993, the Huskies boasted a 31-5 record that included 2 Rose Bowl wins and a national title under legendary coach Don James.
He will always be that straw that stirs the Husky drink, if you will. He will always be looked upon as the standard by which all others are judged.
Don James was always about the things that he was always preaching to us is win the Pac-10, go to the Rose Bowl, win the Rose Bowl.
Don James was really good at using facts and figures and numbers, and like I say, Don was very meticulous on his detailed planning and the pride then that he took in the way our kids responded.
The year before, James' dynasty became mired in controversy as the NCAA and Pac-10 discovered that several Washington players had received improper benefits. Under that spotlight, James resigned in 1993, and the fate of the Washington program fell on defensive coordinator and former player Jim Lambright.
Jim had the dubious distinction of being the guy who replaced the legend, so that in itself was going to be difficult. Washington was just a glorious program that had been rendered somewhat inglorious by the investigations and so on. So it was going to be a tough situation that Jim Lambright inherited.
The players all knew me. It wasn't like I was new to any of them. And so we spent the first month coaching our individual players and getting back into meetings and discussing exactly who was concerned, what were their concerns, what can we do to answer them, how do we get them to stay here and maintain a level of excellence during this probation period.
The Lambright era got off to a rocky start that season as the Huskies dropped their opener to 17th ranked USC. And while a victory at home over Ohio State helped ease the pain, Washington's next contest was on the road against 5th ranked Miami, a team that hadn't lost at home since 1985.
This was our bowl game. This was recognition of our program after the penalties and showing here's how strong we're going to be in spite of, and it was national exposure. This was okay. Hey, go out and play, play your heart out against a team that's supposed to be better than we are. I had an alum that walked up in the stands and saw that they had tombstones that had all the scores of the games that they had won. And they already had a tombstone up there with our name on it without a score.
Unfazed by the hype surrounding the U, the Huskies overcame a 14-3 deficit at halftime and scored 22 points in the first 5 minutes of the second half, steamrolling their way to a 38-20 victory in front of a stunned Orange Bowl crowd.
Signature win for Jim, no doubt, and at that time for the program as well, on a national scale. This was a chance to prove that Washington football wasn't dead, wasn't about to be buried, as some would say, and go down and compete against the very best in a nationally televised game. It was a whammy all right there in Miami.
After the game was over, I made sure that one of our alums brought that tombstone home. So it's in our Hall of Fame room right now.
While Jim Lambright's tenure was off to an impressive start, Ducks head coach Rich Brooks was attempting to turn around an Oregon program that had spent most of its life at the bottom of the pack.
It was not very good. Stadium was half full except for the Oregon State or Washington game. Facilities were dismal.
Well, I don't know that you just show up and expect to beat anybody, and that's my biggest concern.
Oregon was not one of the national powers, obviously, and not even considered one of those teams in the upper echelon of the Pac-8, Pac-10. Had a few good years, but really nothing to write home about. And so I think Duck fans were looking for somebody to take them to the promised land, turn the program around. And Rich Brooks, I think that's why he was given probably such a nice welcome, and that was, hey, can you be the guy to do it?
It was a tall hill to climb, as the Ducks had lost 105 games in Brooks' 17 seasons in Eugene. And after a 5-6 campaign in '93, many fans were calling for a change at the top.
The Duck fans were not very trusting of me, quite honestly, in the first several years.
18 years is a long time to try to get it going, and Oregon was way behind in facilities in a lot of different areas, and Rich never gave up. He never quit believing that he could make this a winning program. And I think that was huge. And even that final year, Oregon started out 1-2. I mean, there were Ditch Rich shirts in the parking lot, and there were a lot of people that were ready to make a change. And even then, I remember Rich didn't care what they thought. He just said, we're going to turn this thing around, whether it's this year or 10 years from now.
The 1994 season got off to a rough start for the Ducks, with losses to two unranked teams in Hawaii and Utah. Sitting at 4-3 in late October, Brooks and his Ducks were desperate for a win.
I thought they had a pretty good ball club, but it just wasn't clicking yet. Chemistry hadn't come together. There was something missing.
I knew we had a good team, but we were a very young team also. We had some good seniors, but a lot of our players were sophomores and juniors, and sprinkled a few freshmen in there as well, or redshirt freshmen. And it was an interesting group, and we started off very shaky.
To capture national relevance, Coach Brooks scoured the West Coast looking for players who would help turn the struggling Oregon program into a winner. One of his prime targets, a quarterback out of Southern California named Danny O'Neil.
Danny O'Neil was a great high school athlete, a tremendous basketball player, an outstanding golfer, and a guy that could wing the football, and he had a good enough mobility that he could run around and escape pressure.
I wanted to go a place where someone really wanted me, and it's always a tough choice because, you're trying to decide from different colleges. Like I had both my brothers going to the University of Southern California. So my family kind of grew up watching SC, and then SC offers me a scholarship, and so that was a hard one it made me consider of where I wanted to go. But Oregon recruited me from the beginning, really hard, really wanted me, always told me I was their #1 guy. And at the end of the day, for myself, my decision was I wanted to go to a place where I could compete.
The Ducks had a signal caller for their high-flying offense. Now, they needed a defense that could withstand the best of the Pac-10.
I always like the fact when I can have great corners that can cover people one-on-one, because it allows you to load the box, put more guys in the box. And because I had guys like Chad Cota, Herman O'Barry, Alex Moden, Kenny Wheaton, to name a few.
Well, Kenny Wheaton, I don't know if we knew yet how good Kenny Wheaton was going to be. Alex Molden was a special, gifted athlete. He was going to play at the next level, and you just knew that. He had an attitude about him that he was going to excel. He was going to be the best there is. Kenny Wheaton, we didn't realize how special he was, how hard he would work, and the gift that he had in that position, too. So we sort of learned with the fans how good Oregon was beginning to become.
The stage was set. Ducks versus Huskies, ready to kick off what would become an epic Pac-10 showdown.
Get us underway and back deep for Oregon. Ricky Whittle and Herman O'Berry. And it'll be O'Berry at his own 4.
I'm Oregon head football coach Mark Helfrich. You're watching the Pac-12 Networks.
Well, Washington won the coin toss, but they have deferred to the second half. So John Wales, a sophomore out of Kent, Washington, will get us underway. And back deep for Oregon, Ricky Whittle and Herman O'Berry.
The clash between the Huskies and Ducks was finally underway. And Washington was looking to strike the first punch with strong-armed quarterback Damon Huard.
And there's Damon Huard, a junior, and a guy who has really come along well this year.
Huard had a full arsenal of weapons at his disposal, starting with electric running back Napoleon Kaufman.
On that same wavelength together. Napoleon Kaufman dancing up the middle, and he's going to break it. He's got one man to beat. And Molden runs him down at the 25-yard line.
The 37-yard run by Kaufman led to a Huskies field goal, an early lead for the 9th-ranked team in the nation. Now it was the Ducks' turn to answer.
Run by Napoleon Kaufman. Ricky Whittle at his own 2. And has a seam to midfield, to the far sideline. Let's see if his hamstring holds up. Whittle out of bounds at the 13-yard line. Tony Parrish finally got there to push him out of bounds, but Ricky Whittle with an 85-yard kickoff return, and he has got this place on its feet. Dino Filial with a touchdown run, and Oregon has taken the lead.
The Ducks were off to a great start in this heated battle of Pac-10 foes.
And the Oregon Ducks have taken the lead 7-3.
Rivalries tend to live within the confines of a state, but when it comes to Washington and Oregon, the bad blood goes beyond boundary lines.
Where do we begin? I hear the term hatred used a lot in the context of this rivalry.
You know, you would think that Oregon State is our natural rival, and I think that they still are, but for some reason, our fans don't like Washington.
Part of it is lore, rumor, past history. I think there was a year when Oregon and Washington and maybe Cal had tied for a conference lead or a chance to go to a bowl game, and it took a tie vote, and Washington voted against Oregon. Anyway, that's the way we've heard it.
You have an in-state rivalry with Oregon State, but the Washington rivalry, especially in the early 90s and late 80s, I mean, that was the rivalry because they were the great team. I mean, they were the champions.
There were many, many years where Washington just beat us like a redheaded stepchild. They just beat us down like a drum. They were the dominant team under Don James.
The Ducks' offense and special teams were off to a fast start. Now it was the secondary's turn to make an impact.
And I think it may be wise to go play action. It's the one thing that scared this Oregon defensive coaches when we talked to them yesterday. It's another thing that Phil Dietrich had talked about as an offensive coordinator, something he had to do during the game.
2nd and 9 for Huard. Going to Bjornson, and it's picked off at the 28. Alex Molden with the interception brings it back to the 15-yard line.
Alex Molden started as a freshman. Last year he had a knee injury and he didn't play up to the levels he did 2 years ago, but he is back where he was as a freshman. You will see him as Huard drops back, throwing to your left on the screen. See if the ball is behind the receiver a little bit. Yes, it is, just a little bit behind. But Alex Molden on a great break on the football. Bjornsson again, they like to throw outs to the big target, and actually that ball was not that poorly thrown. I can't fault Ewert. I just have to say Molden read the play and made a terrific break on the football.
Great speed when he is healthy. His second interception of the year. They mark it at the 19-yard line. And here's Ricketts. Cameron Ricketts inside the 5 to the 3. Deep Devers, the defensive end, finally stopped him, but not before. Cameron Ricketts took it to the 3-yard line.
Excellent design of a screenplay. Watch O'Neal, he rolls to the right just a little bit, gets rid of the football. It's the hardest thing to do. Watch 71, buried the tackler. That was Lawyer Malloy, who actually slipped underneath Eric Reed. That was probably a wise decision by Malloy to get underneath that block, because Eric Reed had a head of steam up. And again, Oregon is here knocking on the door.
Gain of 17 on the play. Dwayne Jones and Ricky Whittle in the backfield. And they give it to Whittle, and he's going to get to the end zone. Ricky Whittle on a 3-yard run, and the Ducks are rolling here in Eugene.
Coming up, the Huskies offense comes alive.
Bjornsson down the sideline.
Being here at the University of Oregon was absolutely spectacular from both an academic and a sports atmosphere.
My dad went here as well as my sister currently.
You know, you can't see another Duck without giving the O sign and say, "Go Ducks." It's just this common bond that we have. You can't experience the nostalgia in any other campus like you can here at the University of Oregon. I am Scott Stewart, Duck fan, U of O, class of '81.
I am Megan Stewart, class of 2010.
And we are the network.
Thanks to Alex Molden and Ricky Whittle, the Ducks took early command with a 14-3 lead.
Getting to that quick start was vitally important, of course. You know, Alex Molden, I think, had a quick interception, gave us great field position. The beginning of that game is exactly what we needed. You know, got some points on the board. Our defense, who was obviously playing great all year, was holding their offense to minimal yards and minimal points. But we just had to get it done. I mean, you still have to accomplish something. You can't just ride that first quarter or first few minutes. I mean, you have to keep fighting, keep fighting.
On the other sideline, it seemed like the 9th-ranked Huskies had lost their fight. Thus far, their vaunted offense was all bark and no bite. But as the Ducks would soon find out, it's hard to keep a tough dog down.
1st and 10 at their own 49. Bjornsson down the sideline. He's got it. At the 10, the 5, touchdown Washington. How about the quick hit from Ewert to Bjornsson? 51 yards on the pass.
One big play by Damon Ewert and Eric Bjornsson, and the Huskies were back in the fight.
Damon was a good, solid college quarterback, much as he was a good, solid NFL quarterback as well. He had a nice feel for the position. He had the physical attributes you'd like to see, and put those into play.
Meanwhile, Oregon's cornerback Kenny Wheaton licked his wounds. Bjornsson had burned the freshman on the play, and suddenly the Ducks' secondary was starting to look vulnerable. And with a quick stop by the Washington defense, Ewert was back on the field looking for more.
Ewert will check off at the line of scrimmage again on 3rd down and 10.
See the backers again, though. See how they're faking up and back, and they drop out.
Out of the pocket is Ewert. Looking long, he's got Janoski deep, and what a catch. Dave Janoski at the 15-yard line, maybe the 14. Herman O'Berry on the coverage, but Ewert throwing on the run, and Janoski with a leaping grab. I'll go with it. 3rd down and 9 at the 12. Hoffman, the lone set in the backfield. Ewert, incomplete. The intended receiver, Janoski again, and Ewert wants that one back. The Whales in for a 29-yard field goal attempt. He's already hit one today. And right down the middle.
As the second quarter drew to a close, the Huskies were within 1 point of the Ducks. The number 9 team in the nation had shrugged off a slow start and were now poised to take out the Ducks in the second half.
The Ducks lead it 14-13. Back to Autzen Stadium in a moment.
Coming up, the Huskies defense sets their sights on Oregon quarterback Danny O'Neil.
And does. It bounces off of Jones.